Hello, nerds! Thank you for joining me here on Nerd News Clips. This is the second channel. This is the place for all of the short-form content as well as the individual sections and just generally speaking smaller things. If you are into the longer form content, youtube.com/generallynerdy is the place to go see that. With that out of the way, let's get into this. Comic books and books. We have, again, New York Comic Con happened, so we've got some stuff to talk about. I mean, it looks bigger on my notes than it actually is, but it's definitely sizable by comparison to how big this section normally is. I'm going to stop talking about how big it is and just go in, right? So, follow-ups and corrections. First up, Batman and the Joker Deadly Duo. We've talked about this one previously. When it was initially announced back in 2018, it is finally going to be on shelves November 1st. Marc Silvestri is writing and drawing this book. It is a DC Black Label book. It's going to be awesome. Go check it out. Our next follow-up has to do with Batman Lazarus World. Again, we've talked about this one kind of in passing because it's the next big arc in the Batman universe. I believe this one even has broader DC implications, but by and large, it's a Batman book. Batman has been seen on, I believe, the cover of the first book in this. Remember, Batman versus Robin led into this story arc, right? So on the cover of the first issue of this story arc, we see good old Bats wearing the helmet of fate, which means very likely that Batman is going to be delving into the mystical and the magical and doing all kinds of different things. And I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's interesting because if you think about the world's finest, him and Superman teaming up, then Superman's one weakness is, or biggest weakness, I guess I should say, is magic. So if Batman has magic and Superman has everything else, then that kind of changes that dichotomy a little bit, doesn't it? So it's really interesting to think about. And the reason I wanted to bring this up specifically is because I wanted to pass this off to the other Batman fans. How do you feel about the possibility of Batman becoming a magic user in the DC universe? I'm still riding that fence, so convince me one way or the other. We'll have that conversation. Next in the follow-ups, speaking of Superman, the Jonathan Kent book that has been going now, I believe, just over, maybe just under a year. Jonathan Kent, this is the book where Jonathan Kent came out as gay and caused all the hubbub and blah, 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 blah. Well, the book has been canceled. Tom Taylor is the writer for this book, and it has been canceled. And I say that it's a little bit of hyperbole because it's not 100% canceled. They are going to finish the story in a 6-episode mini, but that's going to be the end of it. We are going to be returning back to Kal-El proper, so I don't understand why it's so hard for comic book production houses to realize, you know, what it is your fans, the people who actually pay money to read your books, want to read certain things. And yes, it's great to expand their intellectual palette, sure, but when you turn that hard left, I don't know that a lot of people are going to be able to follow you. So it just kind of is what it is. Kind of a lot of people saw this one coming, but we're going to keep moving into some regular ass news. We got Justice League Dark Crisis update. So leading into Dark Crisis is the actual death of the Justice League. That's not exactly a spoiler unless you haven't been reading for some time. So, sorry, I guess. But either way, what's really interesting about this time, because as we all know in comic books, death is only temporary. So this time, the Justice League, while still not 100% officially dead, the villain who killed them, quote unquote, is named Pariah, and the way he is keeping them dead, again, using all of these terms very loosely, the way that Pariah is keeping the Justice League dead this time is that he created worlds that were dependent on the superhero. So each individual member of the Justice League that has died has a world created around them, and they are unable to leave this world. If they leave this world, then the world will die. I believe even I read in one of the panels in this book, because they released the preview pages, I believe he even says if the superhero tries to leave the world, then the superhero that is attached to that world will also die. So very interesting take on what hasn't been really paid much lip service to in the past about the death of superheroes and how it never actually happens. So yeah, pretty interesting subversion of an old time trope. This is another one I wanted to pass off to you guys specifically is how do you feel that this semi-permanence is going to change the way you read comics, is going to change the way that they try and sell comics? Is it going to be that big of a deal, or are they just going to revert back to their old ways in 6 months? Let's have that conversation down in the comment section. And then we got to the announcement for a season 2 of Batman, The Audio Adventures. I could not remember if we spoke about this originally, and then as I was going through the cast list, which we'll talk about, as I was going through the cast list, I saw that I don't believe we have spoken about this. If we have, I apologize. This probably should have been a follow-up, but either way, Batman Audio Adventures is getting a season 2. Matter of fact, it got a season 2. It is currently out now. It is on HBO Max. I don't know exactly how that works as far as podcasts go, because this is an audio play. This is a podcast, technically speaking. It's like the old-timey radio shows where you have voice actors, but this one is comedic in nature. It is not like the Batman Unburied, which was serious in nature. So, very noteworthy all over the board. Written and directed by Dennis McNicholas, sorry. And then this is the cast. Like I said, this is why I thought we hadn't spoken about this previously. So we have Jeffrey Wright as Batman. Batman Bruce Wayne, Chris Parnell from Saturday Night Live as the narrator. I don't know who Ike Barinholtz is. I do recognize that name. I think he was actually a voice on the animated series. He's playing Two-Face. Harvey Dent, Rosario Dawson as Catwoman, Brent Spiner as the Joker. That's right. Mr. Data is playing the Joker for this. Fred Armisen. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about Fred in the TV section, but Fred Armisen as King Scimitar. Heidi Gardner as Harley Quinn, Jason Sudeikis, also from SNL and a number of other things, as Hamilton Hill, Brooke Shields as Vicky Vale, that's right, model Brooke Shields, John Leguizamo, whom I had the privilege of interviewing a few years back, John Leguizamo as the Riddler, Edward Nygma, Kenan Thompson, another SNL alumnus, Kenan Thompson as Commissioner Gordon, which in and of itself kind of makes me super curious. Ray Weiss as the announcer. Bobby Moynihan, who's done a number of voice work projects, but also from SNL. Bobby Moynihan as the Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot. Seth Meyers, also from SNL, as Jack Ryder. Alan Tudyk as Alfred Pennyworth. Alan Tudyk does the voice of the Joker in the Harley Quinn series. Alan Tudyk was I can't think of the character's name now, the pilot from Firefly. Alan Tudyk is a nerd icon. This is huge. He again will be playing Alfred Pennyworth, the butler. You know, Melissa Villaseñor, another cast member from SNL, will be playing Robin. Or is playing Robin, I guess. Tim Meadows, this one's a little bit further back, but Tim Meadows was also on SNL. Will be Jeremiah Arkham, and then Paul Scheer as Mr. Charlie Horse. So a lot of funny folk attached to this. A lot of like old-timey SNL by comparison, because I think the most recent one is Kenan Thompson, but that's only because Kenan's been on SNL for something like 13 years at this point. Everyone else, Sudeikis was on years and years ago. Villaseñor was slightly more recent. I think she was about 8 years ago. And Bobby Moynihan, something similar, about 10 years ago. Yeah, so really interesting. Like, that's like the last great cast of SNL, was where most of these guys come from. So I got to figure out how to get some HBO Max podcast action, because I saw that was a capability when we were rewatching something. I don't even remember, but I've never been able to figure out how to get these things onto something that I can listen to them through. So if you know the answer to that, then let's talk about it, and then I'll update you guys on the next one. Otherwise, I'll try and do a little bit more research on how that works. But that is what we have for news for comic books and books. So let's talk. Comic book suggestion for the week is Forever Evil. New 52, the Villains Month, started with the Forever Evil book. It is a trade. You can go do that. Specifically, though, what I was thinking of is the one-off villain books. Joker's Daughter had one, Penguin. The Bane book is fantastic. All of them are actually quite good. All of them that I've read. I haven't read through all of the one-offs, but Forever Evil, I have all of the spin-off books for this. This is one of the very few, complete collections I have for my comic books, and I dig it so much. It was so much fun. Granted, it is kind of rehashing a lot of things that have happened a number of times throughout the history of DC, but either way, it's a lot of fun. Go check out Forever Evil from the New 52 a few years back. Once again, this has been just a brief segment from the larger episode that has been posted over on the main channel, youtube.com/generallynerdy. Go over there for the long form content, or just subscribe here if you want it in bite-sized chunks. Thank you very much for joining me, nerds. We'll see you in the next one. Before we go, though, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.